For as long as I can remember, people have been saying that I should drink more milk to grow strong and healthy bones. As somebody who recently switched to the almond variety, I always assumed that these ads were nothing more than propaganda coming from people wanting to sell more milk. However, after playing the new game Moo Lander, I realized that maybe the enemies aren't the big corporations at all, but rather space aliens. That's right, the conspiracy goes far beyond a few milk mustaches because this new Metroidvania-style shoot-'em-up gives us the matchup we never even knew that we wanted. Aliens versus cows. Brace yourself, because this is going to be a bovine bloodbath. This is the adventure of Lander, an alien who's on a mission to find the ultimate supply of milk, the lifeblood of his species. Unfortunately, he's not exactly the brightest bulb, as he initially believes that his UFO has crash-landed on Mars, only to quickly realize that the lush forests, plentiful wildlife, and of course the existence of cows must mean that he took a wrong turn and is actually on Earth. This sets up a lengthy adventure where Lander hunts for milk to send back to his home planet. But a funny thing happened on the way to stealing all of Earth's cattle. As he explores this strange and hostile planet, Lander uncovers a compelling mystery about his family's past and a brutal war that nearly wiped out their entire species. This turns into a surprisingly emotional journey through some of the prettiest landscapes this genre has ever produced. Lander and his AI assistant Hamilton go on quite a quest to not only steal the milk, but also to kill the mighty cow bosses. Needless to say, animal lovers may want to sit this one out. At first glance, Moo Lander looks like a lot of other games inspired by the Metroid and Castlevania franchises. When our hero crashes, his UFO breaks apart, and surprise, it's up to you to find all the pieces that are scattered around the labyrinthian stage designs. However, once you actually start to play the game, you realize that it bucks a lot of the genre's cliches. The most obvious shakeup is that you're playing a spaceship, which means that Moo Lander eventually turns into a shoot-'em-up with tons of different weapons to buy and upgrade. While not the first game of the Metroidvania persuasion to feature a UFO, it does allow the story to bypass a lot of the typical power-ups that we earn when platforming is involved. For example, instead of the usual double jump, we get powers associated with a space shooter, like a shield and guns and energy bombs that we can drop to stun enemies. One of the coolest powers that we earn is this laser beam that we can deploy that'll create a barrier that enemies and falling rocks can't penetrate. It's such a simple device, and it opens up a whole world of puzzle possibilities. This is the kind of game that's a lot more interested in puzzles than exploration, which is yet another thing that sets Moo Lander apart from other games in the genre. Instead of collecting a bunch of colored key cards, most locked doors will want you to solve a simple puzzle to advance the plot. As such, this game is a lot more linear than something like Castlevania Symphony of the Night or Super Metroid. While there are definitely big areas in this game that you're going to need to thoroughly explore, the developers do a good job of pushing you to new parts of the planet. There's not a whole lot of backtracking or seeing the same backgrounds, especially as the adventure heats up in the second half. This game does a good job of taking elements from quite a few different genres and making them work together, all in support of a crazy story about kidnapping a bunch of cows. Now, it helps that flying the UFO around the large, interconnected world is a lot of fun. The stage designs are both clever and expertly worked out. This isn't one of those games where you're going to get lost and run around in circles, as it's usually fairly obvious where our alien hero needs to go next. And once the game turned into a shoot-'em-up, I felt like I was in good hands. There are a bunch of weapons to unlock, tons of crazy aliens to shoot down, and even a fair amount of strategy involved in the combat. The only problem with flying around these big levels is that it's so easy to get caught up on the rocks and the vines, and that's really annoying. Visually, Moo Lander is absolutely stunning. Both the backgrounds and the foregrounds are overflowing with gorgeous, hand-drawn foliage that is bursting with color and life. A staggering amount of work has gone into making sure that each part of the world has a distinct look and personality, and not enough can be said about the art design. You'll want to play through the lengthy adventure just to see where you go next, but let me tell ya, you're in for a real treat. Unfortunately, the great looks come at the expense of the performance. The game chugs along and runs into all kinds of frame rate issues, at least when it came to the PlayStation 4 version. Some of this has to do with the frequent checkpointing, but I suspect that an even bigger culprit is the way that the levels are put together. Instead of going from room to room like most Metroidvania titles, the levels here are massive and connected without the obvious loading screens. I suspect that this, along with the visuals, are helping to contribute to the bad optimization. Hopefully the developers will be able to fix some of these stuttering and frame rate problems. My other big problem is that I don't much care for the character designs, especially when it comes to the cows. Look, don't get me wrong, I could spend all day gushing over the backgrounds, but there are some stylistic choices that just left me cold. And yeah, the poorly animated cows are one of those things. And no, it doesn't help that they lead to a lot of boring and repetitive boss fights. While the cows are clearly different and all have unique powers, they still look too similar, and just about every battle can be won using the exact same tactics. I wish this was a game that would have gone bigger and more over the top with the cows, especially the bosses. These fights are often the weakest part of the game. Thankfully, the rest of Moo Lander shines. It's a fun and exciting adventure that isn't afraid to get emotional when it needs to. The game works as both a great shoot-'em-up and a funny farce, all while giving the tried and true Metroidvania formula a good twist. Best of all, you can play through the whole game with a second player by your side. All this adds up to be a milk-themed action game that everybody should play, even those who are lactose intolerant. You'll never look at milk the same way after playing Moo Lander. What starts out as a silly story about aliens kidnapping a bunch of cows quickly turns into a deep, emotional, and surprisingly long journey to uncover the truth about your family and the war. This is a fun and accessible shoot-'em-up with puzzle elements and a big Metroidvania-style world. It also has stunning, hand-drawn visuals that only become more impressive the further you get. Sure, the bosses aren't much fun, and there are rampant performance issues, but Moo Lander is an original game with a quirky sense of humor, great gameplay, and a few twists that you definitely won't see coming. Got milk? I sure hope so, because now is the time to show those pesky cows who the real boss is. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite Metroidvania-style game? I'm talking about the type of game where you explore a big, interconnected world and open up new areas by finding items and power-ups. I mean, you know what the genre is. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with more reviews and, who knows, maybe even a new EGM Ranks episode. I guess you'll just have to tune in next week to find out. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,